Alex Anthopoulos still wants to add an impact starter to this rotation. But at this point, are there any free agents left that fit that description? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today for Thursday, December 18th. Your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all my written work, BravesToday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network, presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, so the position player group, for the most part, is set, right? You really have one bench spot that you can play with. Because if you think about it, you've got your starting outfielders, you've got a DH spot. So if you assume the other catcher, Sean Murphy, is in there, which we know start of the season he won't be, your bench becomes Mauricio Dubon, Mike Yastrzemski, Eli White, and somebody, right? And right now, it could be Vidal Brujan, it could be Brett Wisely, it could be Nacho Alvarez if they want him to be in the majors versus playing every day in Gwinnett. But there's not really a lot of expected additions to the position player group. Like, you're pretty set over there. And the pitching staff, you have numbers, right? You have a lot of guys, a lot of options. But do you stand pat or not? Alex Anthopoulos has talked numerous times now, whether it's before the winter meetings. He mentioned it after the Ha-Seong Kim signing. He talked about it on Tuesday on 680 The Fan. He wants to add an impact starter. And he's never defined exactly what an impact starter is, but my interpretation of that is it's somebody who you would be okay with starting a postseason game for you. Like, we've had Bryce Elder start postseason games. We weren't happy about it. That wasn't the preferred option. That's just what we had to do. My definition of an impact starter is somebody you don't feel bad if you have to send them out for game 2, game 3 of the NLDS or NLCS or whatever. And if you think about the way that the rotation is set up right now, your top 4, per Anthopoulos and the public comments he's made this winter, in some order, is Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Spencer Strider, Ronaldo Lopez. I say in some order, that's probably the order. But then after that, it's a battle for the final spot. You've got Hurston Waldrop. You've got Grant Holmes. You've got Bryce Elder. You have, maybe Joey Wentz or Jose Suarez stretch out over the winter and surprise everybody in spring, but they're likely destined for the bullpen. And AA's kind of discussed, like, what happens if we bring in a starter? Because what he doesn't want to do, and a lot of people have been asking for this, what AA doesn't want to do is bring in a number 5 starter just to have a guy to cover innings. Right? Like, if you bring in a guy to be a number 5 starter who gives you an ERA of 5 over 150 innings, have you really made the team better? And I think this is why AA's been so emphatic about it needs to be an impact starter. And he's emphasized impact. It's not just somebody who can come in and take the ball every 5th day and get you to October. Because again, the Braves feel like they have guys who can do that. Bryce Elder's a guy who can take the ball every 5th day and get you to October. He had an ERA of 5 over 156 innings. What Atlanta wants is a guy that someone you trust to make a playoff start. And the issue that I have right now, when you look at the free agent class, now that Dylan Cease is off the board, having gone to the Toronto Blue Jays, I don't really think that there's a ton of good options that meet this criteria. All right, let's talk about what the Braves want in this guy. The only public thing that AA has said about the guy is they wanted, quote, impact starter, okay? So we're saying a guy who would start a postseason series, one of the first 3 games, okay? That's the definition we're going with here. But there's some other things that we know Atlanta prioritizes in either their pitching additions or rotation additions, any free agent, that kind of stuff. Atlanta likes stuff. And I don't mean stuff as in STUFF. I mean capital S stuff. Using stuff plus pitch modeling, pitch grading, pitches that are above average, and pitches that have the ability to stand on their own as weapons for you. Spencer Strider, Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach. When you look at overall stuff plus last year for starters, guys who pitched at least 100 innings last year, Spencer Schwellenbach was 9th in baseball in overall stuff plus. Like, he was one of the best pitchers on an individual pitch basis in baseball. His fastball was one of the best at a 113. 100 is average. If you're grayed out at 100, you are average. So on average, his pitches by a movement, velocity, location perspective were 10% better than most starters in baseball. His splitter was a 123. His slider was good. His cutter was good. Everything that he did just about was above average. It was very good. That is what Chris Sale was at a 107. Like, Atlanta wants dudes who have good stuff. So we're gonna search for that as well. We know financially, I talked about this earlier in the week, Atlanta to date under Anthopoulos has not paid a guy more than $22 million on a multi-year deal. Josh Donaldson got 23 for the 2019 season. But outside of that, AA has not paid a multi-year deal of more than $22 million. Freddy had an offer for it. Aaron Nola had an offer for it. But AA has not executed that deal for anybody. So we're going to look for guys with a projection of $22 million a year or less. And then clubhouse fit. We've talked about this a lot. The character filter that Atlanta seems to have. They prioritize clubhouse fit maybe a lot more than anybody else because players that the Braves get, especially if it's like an internal extension, typically they're considered to have given up a little bit of potential earnings to be part of this organization in this clubhouse. And all the guys we've talked to this winter who have signed, Mike Yastrzemski, Suarez, all these guys have talked about the good reputation that the Braves have across the game for how they treat their players, for the quality of the organization, their development and all of that, but then also how good the clubhouse is to be in every single day. So, though that's our criteria, a guy that you could trust to start one of the 3 games of a postseason series. They rate out well by a stuff plus perspective. We can also look at whiff rates on that. That helps as well. Projected salaries of at or under $22 million a year, and a good clubhouse fit. And the issue is, now that Dylan Cease is off the board, there's not a ton of options that hit those criteria. We'll talk about it next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. This is a problem. If you are dead set on filling this hole via free agency, there's not a lot of guys left that really kind of hit all of those buttons for you, okay? And AA has said he's not afraid to sign a qualifying offer player. Like, they're willing to do it for the right player and the right deal. I honestly don't want them to pop the number 26 overall pick, and the bonus pool we're expecting to be around $3.5 million just to add a starter. It's not, You're not going to get somebody, in my mind, that raises the ceiling enough to sacrifice a top 30 pick and $3.5 million in spending in the draft. You're just not. But let's look at the qualifying offer, guys, okay? Let's go through everybody starter-wise that is still available on the market. Because remember, Dylan Cease already signed. A couple other guys showed it, Imai, Brandon Woodruff. They accepted their qualifying offer, so they're not available. Let's look at everybody who is available and figure out, do they fit all of those criteria? Framber Valdez is the first one that comes up. He was top 13 on that Stuff Plus leaderboard last year overall with a 108. A lot of that was driven by his slider and his curveball. The slider was a 116. The curveball was a 128. His four-seam fastball actually wasn't graded that well. An 82, 18% worse than the average four-seam fastball. But he also does a lot of stuff with the sinker, which was close to 100, a little under, but close. And then the breaking pitches. So from a Stuff Plus perspective, he fits in there. If you look at it from a swing and miss perspective, 59th percentile, he's probably still in there. It's close. But from a swing and miss stuff with perspective, he's probably in there. The money filter, however, the median projection for him as tracked by Tim Becker of Fangraphs, Tim Britton of Fangraphs. He shared his spreadsheet with me. 5 years, $150 million. So $30 million AAV. If Atlanta were to try to fit that contract into their current payroll, they will have not only gone over that third tier that results in your draft pick getting moved back 10 spots, which AA said is a thing he does not want to do. You would then have also eaten up the contingency money that you have sitting there for in-season acquisitions. You could get that contingency money back by moving an Aaron Bummer. He's owed $9.5 million. If you move Aaron Bummer, the net from the Framber Valdez signing, assuming he gets $30 million, is 20.5. You still have your $10 million buffer. Like, you can make it work. I don't love it. And the reason I don't love it is he really doesn't pass the character filter. He is a guy who played for the Houston Astros during the scandal, he wasn't a hitter, mind you. He was a pitcher, but was still on that roster. We've seen how some of those guys have been received in other clubhouses. And then also, you had that infamous situation with him in early September where he crossed up catcher Cesar Salazar. Salazar gets hit in the chest with a sinker. No remorse on his face, just turns around and walks. Everybody said afterwards there was no lingering issue and all of that stuff. They just kind of got confused. But you can tell it's a thing because Framber Valdez's free agent video, and all agents make these videos for these top free agents. In the first minute of the video, it addresses that situation, trying to downplay it and show that he's still he's a good dude despite that very infamous situation. But it really doesn't feel like that's the kind of guy you're going to pass through the Braves character filter. Mauricio Dubon could probably vouch for him. Dubon was on he didn't debut till 2019, so he was not part of some of those cheating rosters, right? But he didn't even get to Houston until 2022, so he's definitely not part of that. But he spent a couple years with Framber Valdez. He can probably vouch for Valdez, but I still don't think Atlanta would pass him through the character filter, so we're going to scratch him off. Ranger Suarez doesn't pass the money filter. The projection there from Tim Britton, 5 for 125, $25 million a year. He doesn't pass the stuff filter, okay? He's throwing a fastball that's barely 90 miles an hour. Stuff Plus isn't actually terrible. He comes in at a 96, and it's almost entirely because he has a decent slider. His slider's a 114. Everything else is at best high 90s. The fastball's an 84. The fastball's terrible, in essence, is what they're saying. And so Ranger Suarez doesn't pass the money filter, doesn't pass the stuff filter, and honestly, the fact that he was part of the Phillies for a long time probably doesn't pass the character filter. We haven't seen a lot of guys go from Philadelphia to Atlanta. So, there you go. Zach Gallen, money filter. 2 for 52. It's a $26 million AV. Short-term deal, maybe you get over that, right? Like maybe you're willing to go above $22 million on a 2-year deal. But the stuff filter, he was a 93 stuff plus last year. Zach Gallen, when you look at the starters who threw 100 innings or more last year, he was 91st via stuff plus. He was behind such amazing guys as Bailey Ober, Andre Palante, and Jeffrey Springs. I'm kind of thinking, like, what's the explanation for Zach Gallen being so bad last year? He wasn't hurt. He posted. He did all this stuff. He was just bad. I don't think if he didn't have a qualifying offer, you could potentially see Atlanta go after Zach Gallen. The fact that he has a qualifying offer, I think this one's out. Michael King is probably the one, if they were going to pop a qualifying offer guy, he's probably the one. The money filter, 3 for 75, $25 million AAV. You don't technically pass it, but again, a shorter term deal. Maybe you're more amenable to going over it briefly. Stuff filter, he was at like a 99. So it's close enough where you feel like maybe you can make it work. I do think for Michael King, a big problem he had was his changeup was awful. It was a 79. Everything else, slider was a 112. Sinker was a 105. Everything else was good. The changeup was terrible. But he also had all of the injury issues. That's part of the reason why that's a short-term deal. So if you're going to go with anybody, it's probably Michael King. But even there, that's not a great profile to pop a qualifying offer on. And so you're in a situation where, again, if you're trying to find a guy that hits all of these criteria, the free agent market doesn't really have a great option at the top in the qualifying offer guys. If you go down outside of that, and what's really fun is StatCast added what they call a hot stove leaderboard, and you can search for any starting pitcher in baseball who is a free agent this offseason, and you can see their standard metrics, right? ERA, strikeout rate, walk rate, homers, whatever. You can sort by StatCast metrics, whiff rate, expected ERA, fastball velocity, hard hit rate, barrels, whatever. And you can search by the run value of their pitch types, fastballs, breaking balls, off speeds, whatever. And if you go in here, like, we can sort, it doesn't pull in stuff plus, but we can sort by whiff rate. And we can look at the guys who have already signed. 2 of the top 4 are already signed. Dylan Cease and Brandon Woodruff. They're already signed. Number 3 on that list on whiff rate is Charlie Morton. He's retiring. And just because he was getting whiffs doesn't mean he was very good, because he had an ERA of 5.83. Now, the expected was only 4.71, but that's still not good. You're not bringing Charlie Morton, a 43-year-old Charlie Morton, in for a year. You're not doing that. Tony Gonsolin was second best on whiff rate. He also threw 36 innings. Everybody else on here is in the mid to low 20s or lower on whiff rate. And like, just a lot of these guys, like, who do have decent, who are in the top half of this list, are flawed in some way. Griffin Canning was a top 50 pitcher by whiff in baseball this year. He is 9th on this free agent list, but he also tore his Achilles in New York. And so he's probably not coming back until after the All-Star break. Honestly, I don't really hate that idea. Grab Griffin Canning, give him a little bit of money, throw him on the 60-day IL. Jeremy Hefner already knows him, right? He signed with the Mets partially because he wanted access to the pitching lab and to Jeremy Hefner. Maybe you grab Griffin Canning and you throw him on the IL, and the plan is to bring him back in the second half of the year. At the same time, does he want to come to Atlanta after they traded for him and then non-tendered him? I don't know. A lot of these guys here who just don't pass the test that you wanted, right? Chris Bassett, not a frontline starter. The Blue Jays needed starting pitching in the postseason, and yet they used him in relief the entire, the entire playoffs. He doesn't pass AA's number one requirement of being an impact starter. Nestor Cortez, 25% whiff rate, ERA of 6.29, and he got lucky. The expected ERA was 6.91. He also only threw 35 innings, so kind of a small sample size there for the Padres. Just Justin Verlander, whiff rate right around 25%, average 94 on his fastball. ERA of 3.85 was a bit lucky. Expected was 4.28. He's also 42. He'll be 43 next season. His walk rate was a nearly 8% last year. Can you trust him to hold off Father Time for one more year? Maybe. He also feels like a guy you're gonna have to skip starts, give him extra days, and AA, talked to us about that earlier in the offseason, about how hard it is to do that. There's just not a lot of great options in the free agent market. German Marquez can fire the ball. 95 mile an hour, average fastball velocity. ERA of 6.70 last year. He can fling it, dudes can hit it. It doesn't matter. So, flawed market. So, on that note, I've got a couple thoughts, a signing and a couple trade targets that if you want to add a frontline starter, an impact starter, these are probably your only three realistic options. And one of them still a long shot. We'll talk about those guys next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. We finally got movement in the World Series odds. I know on FanDuel these odds are largely driven by people betting, but when you look at all of the additions that Atlanta has made, they've risen to plus 1,500, and they are just barely above the New York Mets for third best odds in the National League. Yes, I'm sure a little bit of that was betting, but a lot of that was also the books, the odds makers saying, hey, Atlanta has filled most of their holes. If you add a starter or another bullpen piece, that could be the final hole. While the New York Mets have lost guys. They've lost Edwin Diaz. They lost Diaz and Nimmo and Alonso and all of that. And when I'm looking at who could that final starter be, Tatsuya Imai is probably the only free agent starter that makes sense. And even that's a bit of a risk. We talked about this, maybe 2 weeks ago? I want to say it was early December, we talked about Tatsuya Imai as far as how he can hit a lot of these buckets. Okay? Again, he has the stuff. I think that day I called it salaries for stuff. He throws a four-seamer, 95 miles an hour. He's got a slider, a changeup, a splitter, both a changeup, a splitter, and a Vulcan change, as well as a curveball. It's a 6-pitch mix, and he mixes and matches them. It's a lot of fastball slider heavy to righties. It's fastball slider changeup heavy to lefties. But usually when those guys come over to the States, the adjustment that they make is they back off the fastball a little bit and they ramp up some of the secondaries. I can see the splitter going up from 4% usage to probably 15% usage, becoming his third most common pitch, especially when you're ahead in the count. Remember what Hurston Waldrop did? When he could get to 2 strikes, it was just splitter city until you were sitting down. Same idea here. It's a lower slot. A lot of the metrics on his actual pitches mirror those of Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan's stuff plus is at a 107 overall, and that's with Joe Ryan throwing only 93 miles an hour, 93 and a half on his four-seam fastball. Not Imai's 95 plus. So it ends up, the slider is a little bit of like a screwball shape. It's not a screwball. That came up a lot in that last video. It's not technically a screwball. Those are different pitches, but it's really similar as far as a movement goes. It's like a baby screwball almost from a movement perspective. And so Imai's a guy that he's got the stuff. He can likely become a frontline starter. The question is, how long does it take him to acclimate to the States? That's the real question. We saw Yoshinobu Yamamoto struggle a little bit when he first came to the States, and I don't even think it was necessarily that bad when he first came. He had an ERA of 3 in 2024, and then a 2.49 in 2025. Both of those were 24. He underperformed his FIP. 25, he slightly overperformed his FIP. He did struggle a little bit early in 24. He did go on the IL a little bit. He missed like from mid-June until early in September. But before that, like I think it was before when he went down, he was sitting on a 2.92 ERA. So like he quickly adjusted. By the month of May, he had already got himself into, pitching with an ERA of 3 and change, right? Like the month of May, he pitched to an ERA like 3.5. So you can make the adjustment. I don't think Imai is on the same level as Yamamoto, neither over in Japan or when he first gets over here. But it's possible Imai can be a postseason starter for you as soon as this year, right? Again, the stuff is really good. He has to sign by January 2nd. And as I talked about on that previous show, the contract projection for him, 6 years, 127.5, which comes out to just under $22 million a year. Now, you do have a posting fee to pay. I did the math on that when it came out to about $21 million. But the good news is, doesn't count against the CBT. That's extra money, doesn't count against the CBT. You could pay that with 1/4 of the battery's earnings. Now, that money goes into paying for the ballpark and everything so that Atlanta's revenue can go towards payroll. But the point I'm trying to illustrate is that line item doesn't count against the CBT and can be covered by 1/4 of the revenue made by the battery. It's a one-time expense there. But he fits the money filter. He fits the stuff filter. He likely fits the clubhouse filter. Some of his recent interviews talking about coming to the States, he specifically said he didn't want to join the Dodgers. He would rather beat the Dodgers to win the World Series than to join the Dodgers. So I feel like he's the type of competitor that's going to fit into the clubhouse well. I'm not worried about the clubhouse fit. He did also something that I do think is very useful, believe it or not, is he's repped by Scott Boras, and you just made a deal with Scott Boras to sign Ha-Seong Kim. So it's entirely possible that you maybe now have a little bit of goodwill with Ha-Seong Kim and signing Imai to the longer-term deal, right? Giving that typical starter contract, the 5 years or whatever, could potentially show Boras that you are willing to give those deals so that you can work on something if you decide you want to bring back Ha-Seong Kim. So this could legitimately, the fact he's repped by Boras could work out for you. So that's option one. That's the number one. It's probably the only free agent that you could see slotting into the top 5 and making it worth bumping Grant Holmes and Bryce Elder to the bullpen and bumping Hurston Waldrop to AAA. And even then, if you do that, you're going to have 4 longmen in your bullpen, and Holmes, Wentz, Suarez, and Elder. And that really feels like it's too many. Because that means when you have a 13-man pitching staff, your 5 starters, 4 longmen, you have 4 leverage arms. I think Grant Holmes personally could be a leverage arm. I think he'd be a very good 7th, 8th inning guy. I think if you asked him to close, he could get there. So not the end of the world. He can be your fifth leverage arm, but it really kind of hurts you to have so many longmen in your pen. Outside of that, I really feel like it's going to be trades. I really feel like if you are dead set on adding a starter and he has to be a playoff caliber guy, an impact starter, it's going to end up being a trade. It's going to be a guy like a Joe Ryan. One of the best fastballs last year. You heard the stuff plus over 100. Run value on the fastballs plus 15. Just an outlier pitch. He's making $6 million in his final year of arbitration. He fits from a money perspective. He is a rental. So is Freddy Peralta, the other guy I wanted to bring up. So both of these guys, if you bring them in, you really need to have an extension as part of the deal. Especially if you're moving a guy like a J.R. Ritchie just to get a Freddy Peralta. You need to have an extension negotiated as part of the deal. But the good news is that money can kick in for 27. They play 26 on their existing contract. The extension money and the salary kick in for 27 when, as we talked about the other day, you have all of that money falling off the books. Aaron Bummer's gone. Joe Jimenez is gone. Like, that's $18 million right there that you could turn and give to a Freddy Peralta or a Joe Ryan or whoever, right? So you have a ton of money coming off the books. You can do that then. Peralta, frontline filter. He started game 1 of the NLDS. Whiff rate, 83rd percentile. His stuff plus was 102, but that was dragged down by the fact he had a changeup at 79. Changeups often don't rate really well in stuff plus models. And it's kind of I know a little bit about why, but not enough to try to explain it on the show, but we'll get to it this winter, I'm sure. Part of the reason I'm kind of big on, like, you just throw a splitter instead. Or in Imai's case, throw 3 different changeups. It's nuts. The money filter, he's making $8 million in 2026. Again, Ryan's making like 6. Peralta's making like 8. So from a salary perspective, you can fit those guys in and still have that $10 million contingency for in-season ads and a little bit more. Everybody else who's out there either has a larger financial commitment. Pablo Lopez from the Twins, $22 million. And Lopez and Ryan may not even be traded because the Twins are taking care of some of their money problems by selling 20% of the team to outside investors so they can pay down the debt. Which, part of the reason they were looking at moving some of these guys, moving to Buxton, moving to Lopez or whatever, was to save money. So, there you go. They might not even be on the move anyway. Nick Pivetta is a name that's been brought up a lot. He's had a lot of home run problems until last year when he was in San Diego instead of Boston for the first time. But also, he has 2 opt-outs in his remaining 3 years of the deal. So I really don't think Atlanta's going to want to send prospects for a guy that they could lose after a year. Unless he's willing to renegotiate that, and I just don't feel like he's going to be willing to do that. Why would you give up that leverage unless Atlanta adds another guaranteed year on the back end? And then a lot of guys are just in the division. Mackenzie Gore, Nationals. Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, Marlins. Like, there's just another obstacle there that a Peralta trade doesn't have to get over. And it's the fact that those guys are in your division. You have to convince their GMs to trade you in the division. And so, like, I'm at the point, because you have quantity, and you know someone's going to go down. AA acknowledged this. You know someone's going to go down. What we're all kind of banking on here, if you don't get a starter, is you're banking on maybe you lose one guy in spring and you lose one guy in the course of the season, but you don't lose 5 guys, your entire rotation in the season. There's no way to adequately plan for that. The Braves have the quantity of back-end arms to cover 1 or 2 guys going down in season. And the goal, especially how you feel about Hurston, Waldrop, Bernardo Lopez, if you think they're postseason starters, the goal is to get, of those 5, right? Sale, Schwellenbach, Strider, Lopez, and Waldrop. The goal is to get 3 of those guys to October. Because it really feels like in recent years, you've been able sometimes to get two of them. I'm thinking about the postseason against Philly. You had Strider and you had Freed. You didn't have a third guy. Bryce Elder started game 3. A.J. Smith-Shawver came in after him. Both those guys got shelled, right? If you can get that third guy to October, combined with the two-headed monster of Raisel Iglesias and Robert Suarez in your bullpen, and Dylan Lee behind them, maybe either Joe Jimenez is available by then. You'd like to think at the end of the season he's around. Maybe Joel Payamps, who AA talked about this after the Hassan Kim signing. He had a really rough offseason, dealing with some visa issues, some immigration issues, wasn't able to do the offseason work he normally does. And they thought that a lot of the inputs, the pitch modeling, what he was doing with the baseball was very similar to what he had done in previous seasons. Maybe he steps up and he's your fourth leverage arm. You could just go sign a fourth leverage arm. I really do feel like maybe you trade Aaron Bummer and that roster spot goes towards another leverage arm. You go ahead and sign that guy now, and if Jimenez comes back, great, super bullpen. If not, you still have 4 high leverage guys, and even if injury knocks somebody out there, you're still covered. So, we'll see what happens. I honestly I don't want the Braves to sign a starter for sake of signing a starter, right? Don't go get a number 5 just to have a guy to take the ball every 5th day and eat innings. Because Bryce Elder exists. Grant Holmes can do that. Like, you have other options for guys to just take the ball every 5th day and give you an ERA of 4.75. If you get anybody, I agree with Alex Anthopoulos. It needs to be somebody who's bumping guys down in the rotation. You're not going to find a number 1. Short of a trade for a Scooble, which is not going to happen, or something like that, you're not going to find a number 1 starter. But if you can find a high-end number 3, which I think Freddy Peralta, based on what they did last year, if you had Sale, Schwellenbach, Peralta, Strider, Lopez, Waldrop, you're starting Peralta in game 3, not last year's Spencer Strider. I personally think Strider is going to be a lot closer to the 23 version next year with a full healthy offseason. But Peralta's a guy that bumps people down. Joe Ryan's a guy that is hovering right there at that 3 to 4 cutoff in this rotation. He bumps people down. Chris Bassett doesn't bump anybody down. You're not saying, oh man, I can't throw Spencer Strider in this playoff game because we've got to give Chris Bassett the ball. You're not doing that. So don't go for a veteran. Don't go for a Chris Bassett. I don't think a 43-year-old Justin Verlander pushes anybody down. I think he's at best a number 5, and your goal is just to try to find a way to get him healthy to the postseason. And so I'm not saying you don't need a starter. I'm saying you don't need an average number 5 back-end guy. If you can't find an impact starter, go sign another high-leverage reliever, and let's get to spring training. This has been Braves Today for Thursday, December 18th. Do me a favor. You're listening on audio. 5-star review would be fantastic. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. And then always the written content, bravestoday.com, free or paid. Those subscriptions help us out a ton, but you may want to get in on the paid subscriptions. We're turning the paywall on in spring training, and we're probably going to increase the price just a little bit. So you want to go ahead and get in during the holidays or early in the new year before we turn that paywall on and bump the price a little bit. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.